All right. Good evening. We are after 6 p.m. My name is Todd Delaney. I am the Vice Chair of the Budget Advisory Committee. The case is that Kate McDonald, our chair, is absent tonight. She's attending parental duties. And the case is that I wanted to welcome everyone back again. The case is that we are still seeking members. There still is an application process for voting members, and we'd love to have everyone's participation. This meeting is being taped. It's not being live streamed, so please adjust your microphones down closer to your mouth, and also make sure that when you want to speak, you turn the microphone on by the light so that everyone can hear you. And if you can, just try to lean your name tags. Don't get me wrong. I know Molly, Craig, Luke, Mrs. Black, Dawn, but if in case for some reason, I have to call somebody out, that kind of thing. So welcome. Moving right along, item number 3, public comments. If you have any public comments, please go to one of the microphones. I think there was one up there, but now it's the case is that so we can record your statement. Is there any public comments this evening? Seeing none, moving along. Item 4, which is the ground rules and norms. The case is that they're clearly posted on page 4 or 5 of the packets, which are outside if you didn't get them. The case is that we also have to approve our previous minutes. The minutes start on page 6. I got one from Katie right down there. Mr. Burns. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, just raise your hands. Ayes have it. All right, so the minutes are approved. We are now moving to item 6, preliminary local assessment scenario 1 through 5, which start on page 11. Mr. Brockman, Mr. Penna.
What we're going to look at are the, thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
We're going to first look at the impact that the scenarios 1 through 4, and maybe a 5th one, for instructional and operational supplemental requests. So what I've tried to do is to use the information from the current ED 279, which includes our estimated subsidy. Unless that's changed by the legislature, that's the number we're going to be stuck with. And I've also looked at the changes in state valuations, which really determine what our distribution of the local tax assessment is. What's up on the screen, and it's on page 11 in your packet, is the calculations of the tax assessments percentages based on the change in state valuations. The state valuation for the district in 2021-22 was $2.96 billion. It's now $3.14350. And that amount is an increase of 6.066%. The average increase for the state of Maine was a little under 5%. So you know what that means. Our state valuation goes up, our subsidy goes down. So because we were higher than the state average, that contributed to our loss of subsidy, which was one of the factors, and that total amount that we lost was about $1.5 million. So every year we use a different set of state valuations. It's a 3-year average unless there are extenuating circumstances. So the average that we used in 21-22 was a 3-year average, and the state valuations for 22-23 are also a 3-year average. because everybody's percentage of the total local assessment is based on their percentage share of the total state valuation for the district, everybody changes a little bit in the distribution
The name tag might be over there.
of the local assessment based on their change in the state valuation. So if you look at the second column, the local percent share, and you can see what they were for the current budget, which, for instance, is 28.053 for Buxton. And then look over to the next to the last column, and you can see the local share for the upcoming budget, the 2023 budget. Buxton, for instance, is now going to be 28.161% of the total local assessment. So you can see the percentage change, they're actually going up. Hollis is going up, Standish is going down, Fry Island is going up, which is different than it's been in the past couple of years. And Limmington is going up. So those are the numbers that I've used to calculate the local assessments. If we turn the page, we're going to look at each of the scenarios and what the impact will be. Scenario number one, you can see at the top of the page, you will see the local share percentages for the towns based on the new state values. And then 28% of the budget, which for scenario number one, if you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see in the red box the three items that are the supplemental requests. And then at the bottom, you will see the total general fund budget, including supplementals. So the total budget was 58,373,925. So that increase in the general fund budget is 11.8%. And if you look at the chart at the top of the page, you'll see how it breaks down for each of the towns. Buxton, the percentage increase in the local assessment based on scenario number one is 18.040%. Hollis, 18,125. Standish, 16,175. Fry Island, 18,509. And Limmington, 19,819. So the average increase for the five towns is 17.586%. Any questions on that scenario? I thought Peter would have a question.
When you're done, I can give you some numbers. I talked to
That's
the
great.
Buxton treasurer today, and I know that our reval of the town, because of COVID and a couple of the people that are doing the reval, delayed. It won't be done by April 1st
So you're
when
not
the
using
new
it
valuation takes
for
place. So
this
that will fall
assessment.
sometime next year, maybe.
So remember, the scenario one is the highest, 2, 3, and 4 is the lowest. And I've also put in a 5, which is with no supplemental requests added at all, so that you can see what the lowest general fund budget without additional would look. We'll get to that. So scenario 2 works the same way. And the amount of the budget with these three 60, 70, and 80 amounts will result in a 9.9% increase in the general fund budget, which will be $57,413,483. And if you look at the top in the last column, you'll see what the percentage increases for all the towns. Buxton will be 14.7, Hollis 14.785, Standish 12.89, Fry Island 15.185, and Limmington is 16.431. The average increase for the entire district is 14.261. And I would assume that this is as far as you want to go down. That you're willing to vote for scenario 2? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Brockman's kidding, okay?
Well, maybe I wasn't kidding.
No, he's not kidding, but the point is that he's kidding in the concept that this is being recorded and, you know, I'd like to keep my house from burning down.
Okay. I'll take that back then.
We wouldn't have to meet anymore though.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Some ways, Lori, I could take the low road, but Kate McDonald will not let me get out of this one that easy.
So scenario 3, looking at the budget, it will be a 9.2% increase in the gross budget. The amount will be $57,010,220, which, just so you know, you can look this number up for the other scenarios, but that is an increase in the gross budget of $4,779,993. And the increase in the overall local assessment will be a 12.863% increase, and they'll range from Buxton at 13.299, Hollis at 13.381, Standish at 11.509, Fry Island at 13.75, and Limmington at 15.007. So the average is 12.863. And because we have to go all the way to the last one to look at what we're facing, you can see that the percentage increase in the gross budget, including 60, 70, and 80 supplemental requests, is $56,671,709, 8.5% increase, an increase in the gross budget of $4,441,482, and the impact on the local assessment will be 11.691. And they range from 12.122 for Buxton, 12.204 for Hollis, 10.351 for Standish, 12.568 for Fry Island, and 13.813 for Limmington, with an average of 11.691. Now, those were the 4 scenarios for instructional, operational and new debt supplemental requests. And I also put in another scenario 5, which is the general fund budget with no supplemental requests. So I took out all the supplemental requests. So the budget at that point would be 54,454,310. That's a 4.3% increase. That 4.3% translates to $2,224,083 additional on the budget. Then looking at the top for impacts on the towns for local assessments, the average increase is 4.012%, and they range from 4.414 for Buxton, 4.490 for Hollis. Standish is 2.764. Fry Island is 4.829. Limmington is 5.988. The average is 4.12. So that's the way they shake out down to the general fund basic budget. When I look at the basic budget and the amount of money that we have budgeted in each of the categories, 10 is salaries, 20 is benefits, 30 is per pupil allocations, 40 is recurring, 50 is debt service. The numbers
Bless you.
that are in those categories at this point are relatively, I'm hoping, relatively stable. What I'm afraid is that before we're done this process, that some of these will be changing. And they won't be going down, they'll be going up. We're not sure about recurring costs. Those are things like fuel, things that are fixed in nature, things that are most likely to be affected by changes in cost of living. The per pupil allocations won't go up. It could only go down, and I really don't want to do that. We don't have a lot of money budgeted for regular building activities. It's less than it was 4 years ago. The total amount of money that we provide all the buildings and programs that you might say is slightly discretionary for buildings, so that they can make some decisions, not on people, but they can make decisions on what kind of initiatives that they might do other than hiring people, but buying materials and supplies. I want to make sure that we use a formula that provides some equity from building to building based on enrollment and some other factors, and also for programs, so that we make sure that there is some equity across the district. That doesn't mean that I think there's adequacy in the number. If we had more money for this, I think it's an area that would be deserving of more money. But for what I've given this year, it is an increase of 3.9% over the previous year. And that 3.9% in that area will just barely cover inflation. The amount in recurring costs is 5.7%, and that doesn't even cover increases in fuel costs. We buy a lot of diesel, gasoline, propane, and electricity. Electricity later in the year is going to take a hit. We have a contract for a while, but the contract is good now, but it'll run out before the end of the year, and we'll face a significant increase at that point. So I don't think there's any extra money in that category. There isn't any extra money in debt service. That covers all of our debt and our leases. The only new thing that we would be adding, but not in this scenario doesn't even add buses. In all the other scenarios, we're adding $80,000 for a 4-year lease for 3 buses that the state has approved for reimbursement. This one, I've taken that out, so that's not here either. So you can see that even in the bottom category, I don't know where I would take money from. Salaries is a very volatile area right now. We're negotiating 3 contracts. The contracts are going to have an impact on the budget because the board is dealing with the administrators, support staff, and FISPA. And all of the people, except for the administrators, are seeing on TV all the time or as they drive down the road that people are looking for employees because it seems that not a lot of people want to work and they're willing to pay up to $25 an hour. And we're negotiating contracts at a time when, you know, all the employees are seeing those kind of ads in the papers and signs on the front lawn of businesses that they're looking for people. And it's going to be hard not to take that into consideration when we're negotiating contracts. It's going to have an impact. And I don't know what that impact yet is going to be. The contracts are still in the process of being negotiated. In addition to just the salaries, also employee benefits, especially the Blue Cross Blue Shield dental insurance increases aren't known yet, will be soon, and they could be anywhere from 0 to 12%. And depending on what they come in at, I might have to adjust those 2 categories, salaries and benefits, up. I'm unlikely to have to adjust them down. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't have this year much flexibility in the rest of the general fund budget. It looks almost like our decisions are going to have to be made based on how much money we want to allocate for extra things, new things, supplemental things. Questions?
All right, Mr. Brockman's gone through those 5 scenarios, the cases that Mr. Burns.
In the case of Buxton.
Green light?
Oh,
There you
there
go.
it is.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
In the case of Buxton, our mill rate's 14.46 right now. It takes about 83 to 85, and I use the number 85,000 to raise the mill rate by a dime. Scenario one comes in at $1.70 to the mill rate increase. Scenario two comes in at $1.40. Three comes in at $1.20, four at $1.10. So using the number that's been used in the past on a $200,000 valuation for a house, and luckily the new massive increases in sales and the prices people are willing to pay for houses is not figured into this yet. A $200,000 house would be a $340 increase. The second scenario is $280. The third is $240, and the fourth is $220. So if you pick a number, wherever it is, and it can't be the top one for sure, then you have to know whatever number you're going to pick, it's going to go up somewhat based on the unknowns right now. So you go to the top one, and you could be pushing for Buxton a $2 increase, and I don't ever see that happening. So, and I understand. I mean, everybody. I got a oil delivered the other day, and I got out of it cheap. It was $4.59, and now it's almost $5. I got some diesel for my tractor today, and normally I get a 4.5 gallon container, and it cost me $12. Today it was 22 and change for that. So I know what people are going through, and that means I'm just representative of a typical person, and other people are going through that as well. So if you start talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 170 added to the mill rate, you know, that's going to be hard to swallow for a lot of people. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mrs. Higgins?
Thank you. Peter, has the revaluation been done in Buxton, or is it in the process of being done? If I
They're
may.
in the process of doing it, and it's the whole town at once.
Right,
Here's the last time we did it over 4 years. We did a quarter, and phased it in that way. This time it's being done all at once, but it won't be completed by April 1st. So it certainly won't count here. And depending on when it gets done, I don't know if it's going to be added into the averages for next year's budget because of the 3-year phase. I don't know what date they bring that in. I know that has to be done at least by April 1st to be considered in the fall when they set the mill rate, and it won't be ready for that.
because my understanding is that as the mill rate may actually decrease because of the increase in the property values. That's happened in different places, and so, okay, so it hasn't been completed yet.
You're absolutely correct in what you're saying. The values can go up, the mill rate goes down, but the money the town still needs stays the same. We're talking dollars here, and it's not mill rates.
Right.
I'm telling you what the mill rate is today, what'll happen, but the dollars are the same. The school's gonna require the same amount of dollars, the town's gonna require what their dollars are, and then they'll adjust the mill rate accordingly. But right now, this is the situation.
So hopefully it'll be better next year, maybe. Anyway, thank you.
Any other comments? I do have one, just in case anyone else want to. As my role in the, as we know, the Budget Advisory Committee has roles, like in a sense, staff, parents, municipalities. I represent the town of Standish because I sit on the town budget committee. On Tuesday night, the town of Standish had a presentation on our valuations and a conversation, a discussion. For those of you who don't know, the last time the town of Standish did a revaluation of its properties was in 2004. The case is that last year, the bond issue, or the bond to start that reevaluation, which would take, as Mr. Burns has said, several years for us to complete, was discussed, but last year it was struck down. So the fact is that the town of Standish, in conversations with the fact of this issue, is still there. Izzy, the town mill rate, which the town of Standish is just starting to do its budget meetings, the first one Saturday, its early projections from our town manager actually have our town budget lower. But the town manager used figures based on Mr. Brockman and I's, past history. We thought we'd get the same amount of money as last year. So unfortunately, Izzy, the town of Standish used the figure from like last year as far as their assessment. When I broke the news to them on Tuesday night, it was recorded and it was live. Some of the reaction was from several of the members, the kidding aside. That's why I said we're going to look at all the assessments. That's part of the job of the Budget Advisory Committee. But the realistic thing, which I told them was, unfortunately they didn't want to hear it, is I don't see this budget coming in, scenario 5, the nuclear option, or scenario 4, as to Mr. Burns and some of the other people here, we have to come to some reasonable assessment, but I doubt that we're going to be able to the mill rate in Standish is going to go up. And the problem we have with this is that it's unfortunate situation of the ED 279, and I doubt that the legislature is going to suddenly come to its senses and grant more money to education, and it's an unfortunate thing, but there's a lot of, this is hitting everyone, and, as someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, gassing up or doing anything, number 40, recurring costs, Mr. Brockman, terrify me, because I just don't see how this is not going to be fixed in a day, and our oil costs, electrical costs are going to go up, and that's one of the areas Mr. Brockman and the district has been able to keep very tight, and the Finance Committee, has done a good job over the years of keeping an eye on that. I just don't see how we're not going to have an increase. So, any other comments or concerns? Ms. Black?
Yes, the town of Limmington, we just had our annual town meeting last Saturday, and our budget has increased over $800,000, to be exact, $867,420.46. So, in looking at this, and looking at these scenarios, and looking at what is going on in our world today with gas prices, electricity, food, we have to work on a balance, something that's going to work and not, because Maine is an aging state. There's a lot of elderly people, and I think we need to look at that and try to balance it so it's not going to hurt a lot of people. I don't have no answers. You guys, you know what you're doing. And when I was on the board for 6 years, I was a very advocate for students' education. Todd knows that. For me, it was all about the children, their education. This was so important, and it still is. So I think we need to come up with a way that we can balance, keep the education, which is so important, but also look at the community members and their taxes. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Mr. Brockman, moving right along.
So tell me how much you want to spend. The lists of scenario 1 through 4 of what the requests for operational and instructional items follow this. I don't necessarily want to go through the lists item by item. I think that Adam can give you a little bit of a snapshot of the kind of things that he's requesting and why he's requesting them. And I really don't look to the Budget Advisory Committee as making the specific decision on what to include in the budget, because that really needs to be a function of the person that's running the department. And Adam has much better knowledge about what we have to do and what would be nice to do. And I think that we need to be able to provide some money, because he's got a number, as you can see, there's, you know, a couple pages for each scenario of things that he's identified since he's been here that need to be addressed. Now, you also have to know that we are conducting a facility audit. These items are not part of the facility audit. We will deal with those things, first bringing it to the Finance Facilities Committee to study it and see what we do from there with that information. And that's coming in a week or two. We'll have some of that. But that is not included in the numbers that you have here. These are the things that Adam has been able to observe in his time here. He's done a remarkable job at being able to find a lot of the things that need to be, I guess you might call them low-hanging fruit, but they're not quite low. Well, they're so low they're on the floor now in a lot of places. And we've got to really take care of some things, because you can't defer forever and you'll never catch up. And I don't want to see our buildings, you know, fall into the ground. So we have to consider that there is an amount of money that we have to recognize will be required to upgrade, fix, or bring up to a code that we really should be doing. And it's not money that comes from his general operating budget. Those things go for, you know, paying the bills for the lights, buying the toilet paper, you know, making sure that we have, you know, oil in the furnace and propane in the buses and things like that. Those are more or less fixed costs. And then on top of that is the amount of money that we need to allocate to cover salaries of operational staff, employees, and benefits. About 78% of all the money that we have in that top part of the budget in categories 10 through 50 go for things that are sort of required. These extra things that we want to add for new positions or for new programs, or we've got to look really carefully at them, and we have to make sure whatever money that we do make available in supplemental, if any at all, because I don't know what you're going to be able to do. We have to make sure that things are prioritized so that highest and best use of funds pays for things that are critical. So I'm not looking for you to really tell us what to do, either operationally or instructionally, because we have experts that have looked at those areas and they've come up with these lists. It's more an exercise of trying to determine how much money can we realistically allocate to cover some of these additional items that we really, truly need.
Lori, go right ahead.
On page 17, the numbers don't match what's on the operational piece.
And
Did
it
you-
really
yeah.
doesn't matter that they don't match at this
Okay.
point, because it's a list. These numbers are no more appropriate now, because they'll change again tomorrow.
I understand that, but I was, as just far as like, so the numbers you're using to build a budget aren't the ones on the operational pages, they're the ones on this
It's
one?
changed 3 times since I started putting this together.
I'm sure that.
You've changed it 3 times.
I know,
He's
just asking.
changed it 3
But
times.
I'm just asking, because it's like, I'm trying to
But
figure out.
They haven't changed
Yeah.
by amounts that significantly impact the overall budget or the tax rates. They change, whether you do 1 teacher or
Right.
20 teachers would change the budget significantly. But whether it's 1 teacher or 2, or whether you actually have budgeted exactly what a teacher costs, and it changes. So that's why I want you to look at total percentages. I don't think we can change things by 15% and have anybody happy. But we have to make significant enough changes in both sides in order for us to be able to present something to the public that they will be willing to support. And this is a very tough year to take a $1.5 million cut in subsidy. I was looking forward to having exactly the same subsidy in the coming year that we had current year. If we did, this would have been our best budget year. We could have covered this whole thing
Right.
without a significant impact on local taxes. But to find that we lose $1.5 million, I mean, I thought maybe this would be the year that we could do a lot of these things that need to be done, that we know need to be done, that programs that need to be implemented or increased. And repairs and renovations could be, taken care of. But when we got that ED 279, it killed us. I went home and cried. Boy.
I know.
Because every year, we tend to have to, really, dwindle it down every year to make sure that we bring something to the taxpayers that's been reasonable. We can't obviously keep it level funded. You just can't, run an operation that 78% of your money goes to people and be able to control that from going up. It's bound to go up unless you lay people off. And, we don't want to do that. We need people. That is, that's what schools are based on. It's teaching and, doing the things that need to be done.
Hence, Lori, why I said I didn't think we were gonna get out of this by tonight. Dawn and then Adam. Dawn?
I just wanted to clarify that if you look further in the packet, there's a supplemental request for instructional scenario 1. But if you look down at the bottom, it includes a subtotal for instruction and a subtotal for operations. So the total that was carried over onto the summary is actually the total for operations, and then if you add the subtotal for operations, the $555,333.21, the numbers do tie out.
If you take those off and put them on the operation side, the positions being requested, your number is down to where you had it. But that number goes into the whole budget. It doesn't matter what the breakdown is.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
I just didn't know, because there's like almost $1 million difference, that's why I was like, oh, which one
Yeah,
are
it's
we
not-
looking at?
You're
'Cause-
you're
right.
not asking for that,
Right,
yes.
I get it.
Thank you, Dawn.
but they're all positions, that's why I, put them there.
Adam?
There's a total of 35 positions being added to the budget this year.
Ouch. All right. Adam?
So I just wanted to add a little extra context to what you see for lists here of projects. A couple weeks ago, I presented a list of projects. It was a fairly large list, but it included projects that were part of the 21-22 general fund budget, and included projects that are gonna be part of capital reserve, projects that were funded through ESSER and SRRF funding, and bond-related projects. With this list, it distills that down and gives you what we're looking at for the general fund for 22-23. So it's just strictly projects listed for 22-23. Now, the list was not created by myself and only by myself. I met with all the principals and all the different schools in the district and gave them a voice as well, and let them give me the list of projects that they thought that they needed. So this is not just coming from my eyes, this is also coming from the principals within your district. If I added up, well, I did add up all the projects after meeting with all the principals, it adds up to well over $5 million. And that's just for 21-22. So looking at the 4 scenarios that were outlined last week, I then had to break down that list to get within the palatable amounts of the 1.5, the 1 million, the 900,000, and the 750,000. So the list that you see here are not all inclusive of 21-22 requests, or 22-23 requests, sorry. They are broken down. I have removed a substantial amount of projects in order to get to the 4 scenario values that were presented last week. To answer your question, Lori, and I think Dawn hit it on the head, is if you look at later pages, there's some, right, the positions are added up and totaled up.
Yep.
So that's what I wanted to emphasize here today. If you look at the different scenarios as you go through the 4, there are some major projects that I think are necessary. Bathroom upgrades would be one of them. I didn't eliminate these projects altogether as I went through the scenario, but I just reduced scope essentially, so cut back on the amount of money that would be funded towards those projects. Unfortunately, I had to eliminate some to get to the numbers that we were striving to get to. If there's any questions, I'm all ears. I'd love to answer anything you guys have for me.
Adam, 1 second. I
Sure.
sense Mr. Penna has something to say.
If somebody else says I can wait, I can be a patient fellow.
Adam, you're on deck, so you're not going anyplace. But Mr. Penna, you have something to interject here?
Well, no, I just wanted to, say that I think that, as we look at operations and we look at our facilities, I think that, Adam's done a great job connecting with, all of our principals. And I think there are a number of things that we have not done over the years for cost-saving measures to live in budget lines and to do the percentages we've run for a long time that haven't allowed us to do capital improvements that we probably should have done. We kept our roofs, kept our furnaces, but we haven't done much else of other things, which is problematic, of course, and we'll see that in the audit when it comes out going there. I think the question we may have to wrestle with is what percentage, whatever the number is, what percentage of the budget do we want to run for the educational aspect of the budget, and what percentage of the budget do we want to run for the operations? And whatever those numbers are, the numbers we have to work within, that we feel is viable for the community to manage, given all the other stresses that we have in the world. And we're not going to ever do, either one of us, either side of the budget is not going to ever get satisfied everything they need. Facilities, we know, is going to be a longer-term project. And I think that as we look at this, we've always been really good in this process of balancing what operations need and what education side needs, the academic piece. We've been pretty good at keeping those pretty close and keeping them well-run and keeping the numbers reasonable for our communities to manage. This might be one of those years where we sit back and say, you know what, there's some great needs on facilities, but we're also going to have to make some real big decisions on our facilities. With that audit, it's going to tell us some things. Are we renovating? Are we consolidating? What are we doing? And so I think maybe one of the questions to help us move forward would be say, what percentage of the budget do we want to put on either side of it? And it might become an era now where we've always tried to maintain parity in our process, which is a good thing, and has been a good thing in some regards. Maybe this is one of the years we have to stray from that plan and say, you know what, for this time, because we have so many academic needs and gaps in learning and students that, and social, emotional, and all the issues that we're facing real in our schools day in and day out, this might be one of those years where we look at that as being, weighing that however you decide you want to weigh that. Knowing that moving forward, there's no way you're not going to be able to tip that scale in the other direction for facilities in your years to come. So it just might be a way to think about it differently and saying that if we look at percentages of the budget that we want to go, and then we can drill down on what that number should be, where should those percentages be for each side of that budget to come to a number. So I just offer that as a way to maybe think through this a little bit.
No problem, Mr. Penna. The case is that, Adam, you're not going anywhere just yet. Mr. Burns?
I would, as just as an observer, if you will, and a taxpayer, I would like to see, and it's up to administration to make a decision and weigh what money goes to facilities and what needs to go to programs. It's far from us to tell you that. Bill, I'm sure, is looking for a number. And in my opinion, the number that we should go with right now, because you have no idea what the increases are going to be on some of those other costs, and we know they're going up, that I would like to see a number that falls between 2 and 3, closer to the 3, but I wouldn't want to see all the numbers that come in when you finish with contracts and oil and all the rest of it. I wouldn't like to see it exceed the number 2 scenario, because if it gets to that number or much higher than that number, based on all the other expenses that people have, I think the budget would be hard to pass. And that's my opinion only, and everybody else can make their own.
To Mr. Burns' points, what we're trying to get to is to try to provide guidance. Our advisory nature is to try to provide back to the administration some kind of reference point. And it's my every intention, the fact is that to not become an absolute, but also to try to, let's say, steer the tanker that we're in and move it, in a sense, provide a little guidance or feedback if we can. Not to put everyone on hold, because the numbers were just presented to us tonight, but I do feel that, to Mr. Burns' point, is where do we see the go, no-go point of our lives? Scenario 4 is off the table, let's say, and scenario 1's off the table. Where does 2 and 3, do people feel that 2 and 3 is, let's say, acceptable, tolerable, or the thing less likely to, in a sense, move along? Izzy?
Thank you. I agree, we've got to find that elusive middle ground. And I guess my thought on the assessments scenario is that, again, I agree, 2 and 3 are where we need to concentrate. To the supplemental operational scenario, my thought is, because there's so much that needs doing, my first concern there is safety and codes, I guess. And there, I'm not familiar enough with all of the things that have been identified. That's why Adam's the guy in charge of that. But I think that needs to be a focus of that particular part of it. If that's not too simplistic. If it is,
Now, if you look at what I did in this slide, I looked at scenario 2, and for 60, which is the instructional supplemental, I put in $1 million for that. And at that level, they were looking for $1,076,000, so. And operations was looking for 645. And I put $1 million there. And I put 80,000 for the lease of 3 buses. Now, how that works out, I think we can cut the 645 out of, I haven't talked to him about this, so he may shoot me for saying this, but.
We're not on TV yet, Adam, so just reactions can be like whatever you want. As long as you don't say anything, we're okay.
Yeah, don't throw anything at me.
Yeah.
Okay, you do that. But what I'm thinking, what we can do is we can, where on your side, he has a bunch of positions. I'm likely to cut most of those out.
Sorry.
I will talk with him about which ones are most critical.
See, that's why we shouldn't have sat him, Erica, this is why, as chair, you should not sit like, this is the Becky Bally kicking Mike Delcourt underneath the chair moment we were having before the meeting started.
So, I think I can work with him to get him down off the ledge and still provide enough money so he can get some of the, through his knowledge of what really needs to be done and what we can get rid of. I mean, I know he needs everything that's on his list, I know that, but everybody does. And I want to be able to bring something that, as a group here, we can support and that you can go out in your communities and be able to say, you know, they did a good job at trying to keep things in a very difficult year under control. So what that does basically is about what Peter was talking about, was trying to stay around the 2. I mean, and we can go down, you know, obviously anywhere, but even if,
Hey, 270 first.
Sorry, Mr. Brockman has the ability to change these programs on the fly. It's one of the most dynamic things, and talking to other districts, even 5 years ago, they were like, what? You can do what? So he's literally changing the numbers in front of us.
I gave him 9 million.
Yeah, hey, whoa.
He would like
Okay,
that one.
There's no way I'm gonna let you,
I make a
yeah,
motion.
there's no way I'm gonna. Yeah, don't even, Adam's poker face just went completely bad. I'd be taking everything in his wallet, okay?
Okay, so
No.
this probably, I'm thinking that we're down enough so that we're under the 2, under scenario 2. This is what it looks like on that screen for the tax increases. It's an average increase of 10.523.
Lori, please, yes.
Yeah.
Is there any chance, I mean, any scuttlebutt that they're gonna throw a little more at the 279?
I don't think so, but I
Some years, you know, that's
They
the
do.
preliminary 279, and then the next one's a little bit better.
that's what happened last year.
Right.
And they have money. They could do that if they wanted to. And, you know, I wish they would. If they, you know, if we could get 900,000 would help you a lot. That would get many of the things that you need.
Sorry,
What we're gonna look at with what you need, we're also gonna look at, I hate to say this, Easter 3 money. If there's some of those positions that we can move back in. The problem with that is that he's gone next year, so he doesn't pay for it.
June.
But you're gonna be here, and you're gonna pay for it when we can't afford them next year, and we might have to cut them, yeah. You know, because
And that's what we figured in our budget, when we did our work, like, we looked at our numbers, we forecasted, I mean, it's easy to predict, and we can see what's happening in every school and what our numbers are gonna be, given it's all stay stagnant, right, for the next couple of years, like, we looked at, this is probably gonna be, like, we feel like, I think I'm speaking on behalf of, like, that we can sustain, like, this is not, like, we don't have another bubble coming next year, where we have to, like, it's, what we're looking at now with gaps in learning and all these other issues we've had, and services that we need to provide for our kids that have surfaced since COVID has come about. But we also feel like that number is, we're not gonna come back next year and say, hey, we need another $1 million next year because we need all of these teachers in order to stay. Even though we're shifting some and we're losing a few people here and there, for the most part, we're gonna be in good shape. They might have to add a K at Buxton, I mean, that's questionable, but we'll see how that plays out in those numbers. He's got a couple big numbers in the middle of his school, but it's not gonna be a drastic number like it is this year. We think that we're gonna be set for the next few years with what we have in our numbers. So that's a positive in that regard for budget spikes that could happen. So, if that's any help, but it does seem to be, we're in pretty good shape for that regard.
Before I call on you, Mr. Burns, Mr. Marion is a former legislator, and I've talked to 6 legislatures since the ED 279 got handed out to us. Unfortunately, Lori, the guidance that, you know, as the budget is set every 2 years, is last year there was a budget surplus due to federal funds. So they kind of passed some money along. This year, unfortunately, as anyone who watches TV knows, is that our legislators are looking at ways of assisting our financial burdens right now. They're looking, you know, the governor wants to give us, you know, money and things like that. My concern and worry is they're going to be so busy trying to help by, you know, gas tax, maybe doing this over here, that they're going to have an issue when it comes down to the fact of, like, education is not going to raise up in that level. And you know, their expectation or concern last year was they had a surplus, they still have a surplus, but unfortunately their direction and motivation, talking to our legislators and talking to several others, is they understand our pain, but unfortunately not all the districts were impacted. And one of the things I said on Tuesday night on TV was the city of Portland was hit for more money than we were, but we were number 2. So of all the districts in the state who got hammered by the ED 279, Portland, whose budget is twice ours, was, you know, let's say around 3 million, if I remember correctly, Mr. Brockman?
Just about.
Just about 3 million. And the fact is that ours was 1.5. So literally, I don't see unfortunately, Lori, the ED 279, maybe they'll adjust it a little, but I think they're gonna find other places to put the money, and unfortunately, it's not gonna come our way in the scope of $1.4 million. Unfortunately, that's a shame. Lori will have a comment, then Mr. Burns.
Yeah, actually, I changed the subject, actually, sorry, Peter. But I just wanted to say that I appreciate the way you presented operations this year, because in the past, we only saw capital improvements, and then there was never any, I love that there is input and attention paid to each individual school, and that there's, and that people can see that there's a whole lot of stuff that used to just be called maintenance, and that maintenance stuff just keeps piling up because we never earmarked for it. We only earmarked for capital improvements. So I really appreciate this new approach to looking at operations. Nice work, Adam.
Yeah, finance facilities used to be, sorry, Deb Black is a former finance facilities, and to Mr. Marion, who is, yeah, sometimes they, you know, getting into the minutia can be helpful and impactful. Mr. Burns, you had your hand up.
Bill, the scenario that you made with the changes that you made is basically a step up from or a step down from 4, basically. It's a reduction by roughly almost $300,000.
Yeah.
That's basically with the understanding that you still have a bunch of things outstanding that are going to cause that number to increase.
That may cause it to increase.
Well,
we'll
we
find
know
out.
it's going to.
Well,
I mean,
probably, but-
with contracts and fuel and electricity and those kinds of things, you know they're going to be,
You want me to make it higher?
well,
No,
You do what you need to
No,
do,
no.
but, you know, I just,
What this, basically, the difference between scenario 2 and this one is that the gross budget is up 7.9% instead of 9.9. So it's a 2% decrease in the overall budget, which really results in a pretty significant decrease in the tax rate. Oops, want to go to that one.
oh, it does.
So the tax rate was 14.261 in scenario 2, and it's 10.523 in this scenario. So it has brought that down pretty significantly. I know that it's nowhere near any of us would want it to be, but this is an unusual year, that's all. It just, the 1.5 killed us.
The $1.5 million affected our mill rate, if you will. It amounted to about 60 cents.
Yeah.
That hit us to begin with before we even talk about the existing budget today.
Yeah.
So I calculated that ahead of time.
So what I'm thinking is that, what we're gonna have to do as numbers come in that we're not sure of, that aren't, nailed down yet, I'm still wanting to look at, whoops. Now, we have $1,900 almost. 1.9 million, sorry. Where we can look for modifications in the 900,000, 900,000, and 80,000, we can still look at how we can take advantage of ESSER funds. Now, that is a number that we know that there's gonna be an impact the following year, but I liked what I heard Paul say, is that, and Lori both, saying that they think that they may be able to maintain without having to add in another year. And maybe we can work with Lori and the new superintendent to really decide if we can afford to lose one, maybe that money that we could save there, either by putting it into ESSER and making us a little bit more vulnerable the following year, and having a little bit of money then to put into one of the areas that we ended up being short in the operating budget. But there is still some flexibility, and we can work together to get the best for the money that we have available. And that's something that I know Paul and Lori and the principals will be really working at, and what they can do, and we'll look at it too, and I'll say, Adam, you just can't have that year. You can't have that truck, that's all.
Okay, before Adam makes a comment, Mr. Brockman, because of our meeting next week, would it be potentially possible, and Mr. Burns, I'm just going off my mental math here, this scenario here, if we called this one like 4A, roughly, because it's, let's say in the neighborhood, all right? Could you come up with a scenario, let's for the sake of argument, call it 3A, where we had a slight increase in 60 and 70 from the 900 and 900, and leaving 80 at 80, so to speak?
So what kind of number do you want to put in there?
Let's go with basically 1 million, 1 million, and 80. We'll call that 3A. Mr. Burns, my job is to do the things that I have to hate, which is do the math and say, okay, there's a low, and I have to provide you options, sorry. It's just the job I'm stuck with. That's why Kate didn't let me escape this role. But I have,
That's,
yeah.
this 3A would be this.
Yeah, I understand. I did the math in my head.
I just let the machine do it.
Mhm.
I couldn't do it in my head.
Yes. But I just think if if I present to you two options for next week,
Yeah, I can put those
sorry,
into a pack, yeah.
to Ms. Napolitano's point, I like to see the numbers. We just got this tonight, but this gives you a baseline of what, next week, if the administration's gonna ask us, the BAC,
So
to,
we basically went from 7.9 to 8.2%
Mhm.
on the budget. And-
change at 0.3, deviation.
Yeah, I round different than you do.
I know. That's okay. Sorry, Mr. Brockman and I had this once debate. Well, why do I have to round up to 6 digits? Because I can, but, that's just weird, all right?
It's 11.21.
Yeah.
and, You know,
Deb's laughing, but she,
Keep it simple.
yes,
It's simple.
yes, I know. I'm trying to keep it simple. So I just want to present two options, not four, and this will allow Adam and the administration to come up back with kind of what this means as far as instructional, operational. It's not an absolute, Adam. It's just a guidance, because if you, by the way, my brain actually did it. Like in scenario one, the BMS roof was 200,000, and in scenario two was 100,000. And I'm not even gonna ask Adam how the hell he did that, because that's yeah, just did left roof. So only half the roof gets done. So if the kids are over on this side of the building, they just
Yeah,
have
yes.
buckets, So don't get me wrong, but I would like to, if we could present this back to everyone, give them the the guidance of what this roughly would understandably mean.
absolutely.
Then next week, I'm assuming the BAC would try to provide, do you feel, talking among, to yourself or to your neighbors or anyone, how do you feel, would this go over? Would people support it? Would it be something that we could accept? This is our district and this is our situation, and it's not great. And there are other words I could use for that, but I'm, being recorded, so my wife will be very mad at me if I use words my daughter can't use. So, the case is that, yes,
I know a question was posed, and in all of these scenarios, you're keeping things equal, and I just kind of wanted to highlight for those that don't have the strategic plan, the board's strategic plan as readily in mind. So the 6 categories that we have are under education, social, emotional learning, facilities, safety, retention, and pathways. And so I think if you kind of break those down, they are about 50-50, so I do appreciate that you're keeping those numbers equal. I know there was a question, how do we allocate that? I think there's a case to be made that retention could definitely fit into that operational budget, because no one wants to work in a dilapidated building. Pathways, same thing. There's physical things that need to take place for some of these pathways to execute. So I appreciate that you've got that the supplemental budgets equal, because I do think the strategic plan is guiding at least the board to consider both equally. So, thank you.
and to our chair of our school board's point, the other reality is that if you look at some of these scenarios, scenario 2 and 3, in reality, based on this, Mr. Brockman, we've cut like $500,000 out, which isn't a bad thing to say to people, that the BAC did its responsibility and did sharpen its pencil. Yes, Mr. Penn is not going to be here, but everyone else in the room will understand he still has our best interests of our students at heart, and so does everyone else here.
He'll be a substitute teacher if he doesn't go to Switzerland.
Sorry, Lori.
Better chance I'll be driving his Kubota than I'll be substitute.
Trust me, if my wife has her way, he's going to be in a classroom, just so it's the pain and suffering can be shared. The fact is that, Adam, I'm not putting you on the spot here, but this, even though we skipped over 60 and went right to 70 on this thing, any other input or guidance to this, before we go back and try to have a kind of synopsis in the last few minutes we have?
No, I guess I don't have any additional input. I do like the 2 scenarios that you proposed here tonight. I think that's a great idea. Whatever those numbers may be, I'll work towards those 2 numbers.
Right.
Best I can, obviously, and
Yeah.
I can explain the different routes if you'd like after this.
Well, if the question comes up, Adam, what I'm saying is, we're not going, as Mr. Brockman is, and historically, we're an advisory board. The reality is that push comes to shove, if the, Finance and Facility Committee says this roof isn't gonna cut it, or this truck isn't gonna cut it, even though Mr. Brockman says you don't get it, there comes an absolute point where we have to make decisions. But my guidance to everyone here is, the understanding is, yes, there's a big differentiation, but, and we're very lucky, our facility staff and our staff itself makes magic happen sometimes, but there's a limit to how much they can do. So, as I said, I'm only making fun of the fact that one roof was 200,000 and one roof was 100,000, and what does that mean, so, yes, I'd like to see these scenarios laid out, and not absolutely, Adam, this is what this means, but some guidance as to what this could be.
We can give you some real priorities, but
Yeah.
you have to understand that priorities change
Oh, yeah.
between now and next fall or whenever, and he's got to have enough flexibility to be able to address the things that he needs to
Yes.
change. And that goes for the instructional side too. May end up that they need something else different than what they were initially hoping to do, that they need to do something else.
Yes.
That's, flexibility is really important. We all know that budgets aren't science. Budgeting is an art, and we have to be able to make decisions by the administrators that have been hired to be the professionals and to make the right choices for the kids. And, I don't want to tie their hands so much that they're stuck having to buy a truck when he needed to fix a roof. That wouldn't be good.
Yeah. And just a point, by the way, Kate and I always try to stress this. If you have any questions, concerns, always feel free that if you feel, let's say, less likely to want to bear the burden of it, part of Kate's, responsibility as the chair and my responsibility as the vice chair is, if you think that you want to see something, you can ask Mr. Brockman and Tina to try to put it together. That's absolutely my encouragement. If you'd like us to, in a sense, to ask, similar to, we had some questions about enrollment or things like that. Kate and I have no problem asking for whatever you're looking for to help guide you. As realize that part of your job is to take this information and support it out there on the street. And so knowing what kind of instructional changes, what kind of operational changes are coming is one of my guidances to you. Is when I start saying doom and gloom to Mr. Brockman and the superintendent and things like that about how some people are reacting, 9 times out of 10, I still fight the fight over the fact that I think the Budget Advisory Committee does its job. We present it to the board, and then the board does its job. But it's still the rights of the voters, who show up in May and then who show up in June to approve this. And I've been very proud that our district gets the message that we do, that we work very hard at this, and it's tough decisions, and we get there. There are districts that don't, and they have hard times with the budget. Think about Scarborough and how many times they have to pass a budget. So I'm very happy that if you have questions or concerns, bring them in. Send them to Mr. Brockman and Tina, and the fact is that we can try to provide whatever information is helpful. That brings us, of course, to my favorite part of this question, item number 8, group questions and discussions and next steps. We have a meeting next week, Mr. Brockman.
Yes.
So based on these scenarios, you're going to come and present us, as well as try to give us a little bit of background information as far as operational, instructional, what this could mean.
Yes.
Not absolutes, but somewhat of direction. I'm assuming that based on my statements and what you've heard is that next week we will probably be leaning towards giving him some, if we think this is okay. Because we're coming to,
Yeah.
rubber
If
and
we-
road.
If we have any better information about some of the gaps or some of the issues that we might have with the rest of the general fund budget, we'll bring them to you too, so that you can review those if we have any information that's better.
Yeah, and I strongly encourage you to reach out to your legislators and explain to them how this situation, although we understand that, what's going
And tell
on.
them we need another $1 million.
Yeah, and
I guess we're not.
I'm not talking about them picking up lunch for us. I'm talking about the fact that, hey, wait a minute, we got hit hard, and this isn't something that was, nice of them. Outside of that, anything else? Seeing none, the cases that you all have your homework now, and the cases that, Tina, if you could send us out this just, electronically. Outside of that, the chair will entertain, if there's no other public comments or questions, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Erica is since my first. Who's my second? Okay, thank you, Luke. So we have a first and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. And by the way, you don't have to make fun of the fact that I got you out of here a couple minutes early, because Kate didn't. I'm sure Kate will watch this.